On August 25, 2013, inside Tokyo's Ota City General Gymnasium, a storm began to gather, not in the skies above, but within the squared circle where the ropes closed in on history waiting to be written. The air was electric, filled with the crackle of expectations and whispers of destiny, as Ryoichi Taguchi, the reigning Japanese light flyweight champion, a man with grit engraved into every punch, prepared to defend his throne against a boyish but bold upstart. Standing across the ring was Naoya Inoue, merely 20 years old and walking into only his fourth professional bout, yet carrying the weight of something larger than promise. Already dubbed the Monster in hushed tones by trainers and gym rats alike, Inoue had a reputation stitched into his short resume: power that could crumble stone, speed that confused time itself, and a mind sharpened by a father's teaching, and a family's fire. What began as a bout for the national title transformed into something greater, a test of resolve, a litmus for legacy. When the opening bell sounded, it wasn't just fists that met, it was eras. Taguchi came forward, with the swagger of a seasoned general, planting his feet, jabbing hard and sending out right hands like checkmates waiting to be confirmed. He tested the kid early, drilling a body shot that made Inoue's ribs rattle like a war drum. It was the kind of punch that humbles hype, that makes boys into boys again. But Inoue didn't wilt. He adjusted. He stood firm, rather than slipping, into survival. He leaned into the moment, pivoting slightly and responding with a jab that landed squarely in Taguchi's midsection. The strike was clinical, yet its message was raw. I'm not here to fold, I'm here to fight. Inoue's counters didn't just score, they stirred something. This wasn't a young man intimidated by a belt or distracted by lights. This was a fighter born for collision, crafted not in promotional packages but forged in gyms that reeked of blood and potential. Taguchi kept pressing, mixing in shots that tested every sinew of Inoue's core, each thud a reminder that greatness demands pain. Yet as the rounds built momentum, something changed. Inoue's timing grew sharper, his feet more certain, and his strikes more sinister. His father, guiding him from the corner with calm commands, watched as his son began to weaponize angles, shifting left to land a liver hook and slipping right to uncork a straight that kissed Taguchi's chin. The crowd began to sense the shift, each landed shot echoing louder than the last. Still, Taguchi refused to step back. His resolve was granite, his intent etched into every forward motion. With beads of sweat pouring down, he threw his own thunder. Body shots that stung, jabs that pierced. Each time Inoue would strike, Taguchi would respond with authority, forcing the young phenom to think twice before stepping into danger. This wasn't a passing of the torch. It was a tug of war for it. The rhythm of the fight became violent, poetry. Inoue landing 3-punch combinations upstairs, Taguchi responding with a single but solid jab to the sternum. Back and forth they went, each round a verse of suffering and strength. Taguchi, though being pushed back, didn't break. He rallied with the kind of grit only seen in champions, his pride more dangerous than his fists. He cracked Inoue a few more times, daring him to blink, to falter, to reveal himself as mortal. But Inoue had already made the decision to endure. He wasn't in the fight to survive it. He was there to own it. Blood began to trickle from noses, sweat-drenched gloves, and fatigue danced in the shadows, waiting to claim whichever man blinked first. But they never blinked. As round 7 arrived, the fight transformed from a physical test to a psychological war. The punches still landed, but each breath grew heavier, each movement more labored. The audience felt the weight of the moment as both fighters entered the deep waters of fatigue, relying less on strength and more on sheer will. Inoue's combinations began targeting the solar plexus and liver, causing Taguchi to stagger briefly, but even when his legs buckled, he gritted his teeth and fired back, refusing to let his title slip without a war. He landed jabs that reset Inoue's rhythm, and straight rights that shook the ropes. Inoue responded with precision, reading the patterns and exploiting the small windows Taguchi unknowingly left open. He began sliding under punches, digging to the body, then snapping upstairs with hooks that clapped against Taguchi's jaw. Still, the veteran wouldn't yield. With every rally Inoue launched, Taguchi matched with an explosion of his own. By rounds 9 and 10, neither man showed signs of breaking. If anything, they surged, despite broken bodies, despite lungs, on fire despite legs whispering surrender. Every landed shot drew a louder reaction, not just from the crowd but from the fighters themselves, grunting, grimacing, grinding their way forward like warriors in a storm. The final bell rang not as a release but as a monument to endurance. Both men raised their gloves drenched in blood and respect. When the judges announced scores of 98-93, 97-94, and 97-94, it was clear Inoue had earned his first title, but more importantly, he'd earned his place. He hadn't blown Taguchi out, he'd battled him, proved himself in the furnace. It was, as many said, the hardest 10-round fight Inoue would ever experience in that weight class. And yet, for all its brutality, it was just the beginning. Fast forward to December 31st, 2016, Tokyo's Ariake Arena now set the stage. The lights glared brighter, the stakes soared higher, and Inoue, undefeated at 11-0 with 9 knockouts, stepped into the ring not as a hopeful, but as a reigning WBO superflyweight champion. His opponent was a legend of Japanese boxing, Kohei Kono, 36 years old, a 2-time world champion, a man with scars both visible and hidden, whose reputation for taking and delivering punishment had become lore. Many thought Kono was over the hill, a name meant to pad the resume, but true fight fans knew better. Kono wasn't there to play gatekeeper, he was there to test the fire, to see if Inoue's meteoric rise could survive a myth. From the moment the bell rang, Inoue made his intentions clear. Snap jabs to the head, ghost-like lateral movement, and crisp straight rights that found Kono's face with shocking ease. Within the first round, Kono's face was already showing signs of damage. Blood smeared across his brow, a reminder that speed and precision can carve even the toughest stone. But Kono didn't retreat. He surged forward with the desperation and pride of a champion who has felt glory and refuses to fade quietly. He threw looping shots, heavy rights, and digging hooks that forced Inoue to respect the power, even if the younger fighter's reflexes and balance kept him out of the worst of it. Still, in round 2, Kono fired back a shot that clipped Inoue just right, causing his legs to stutter for a split second. The crowd roared, the veterans in the audience sitting up straighter. Maybe this wouldn't be easy. Maybe Kono still had fire left. The middle rounds descended into something closer to trench warfare than technical boxing. They fought chest to chest, throwing hooks in phone booth range, exchanging body shots that echoed across the arena. Every clinch was broken reluctantly, every breath drawn with caution, and every movement measured by instinct and fatigue. Kono refused to quit, his mouth bleeding, his face swollen, but his eyes never betrayed surrender. Inoue, now navigating a man who wouldn't break, began changing his rhythm. He shifted his angles, used feints, stepped back to create space, and launched salvos of combinations that drew gasps from the crowd. His uppercut became a weapon of surgical beauty, his liver shots a reminder that precision can be more punishing than brute force. In round 5, Inoue struck gold. A left hook to the body sank into Kono's side and dropped him to the canvas for the first time in the fight. The crowd erupted. The camera shutters clicked like firecrackers, and the moment teetered between climax and continuation. Kono, true to legend, stood up. He shook off the pain and motioned forward as if to say, "I'm still here." But Inoue had tasted the blood of belief. In round 6, he circled carefully, drawing Kono into overextension. Then, like a coiled spring, he struck. Left hook, right straight, another body shot. And the sequence ended with Kono crumpling again, this time slower, his face drained not just of energy but of resistance. The referee counted, and Kono, every inch the warrior, tried to stand. He beat the count but swayed. The referee had seen enough. The fight was waved off. Inoue didn't celebrate wildly. He knelt beside Kono, helped him to his feet, and shared a warrior's embrace, one that said everything about respect, pain, and passage. That night, Inoue improved to 12-0, defending his title for the 4th time. But more than stats, he shattered a myth. He dismantled a man once seen as unbreakable, not with cruelty but with calculated ferocity. And in doing so, he proved he wasn't just a Japanese prospect or even a champion. He was a global force in the making, a storm that couldn't be regionalized. But here's the deeper truth buried under the sweat and raised belts. Without Taguchi's heart and without Kono's jaw, Inoue's rise would have been just another highlight reel. It's easy to praise the blowouts, the first-round knockouts, and the dominance. But what made Inoue the monster wasn't the perfection. It was the pain, the struggle, the proving grounds. He didn't just win fights, he survived wars. Against Taguchi, he learned what it meant to be tested before the world knew his name. Against Kono, he faced down the ghost of what he might become. Older, slower, but still full of fire. And triumphed, not by walking through, but by earning every inch. These fights, spaced by years but bound by blood, were more than milestones. They were crucibles. They sculpted a young man into a fighter who would go on to flatten Juan Carlos Payano in seconds, to battle and best the great Nonito Donaire in one of the decade's best fights, to rise through bantamweight like a hurricane collecting gold, to become undisputed, and to threaten the very structure of pound-for-pound rankings across the globe. But without those 2 nights in Tokyo, without the pain of Taguchi or the punishment of Kono, there is no story. Without resistance, there is no meaning to dominance. What makes Inoue legendary is not that he wins, but that he's willing to bleed to prove he deserves to. He's not just fast, powerful, or technically sharp. He's willing to walk into fire and keep walking until the smoke clears. That's why he matters. That's why he's feared. Because he doesn't crumble. When the pressure rises, he sharpens. And now, years later, when the world watches him, they're not just seeing a champion with belts. They're seeing a man who stared down war and never blinked. That is Naoya Inoue. That is the monster. Not a myth, but a truth forged in pain. Proven in blood and crowned by battles no scorecard could ever fully capture.